Okay, next part is the citric acid cycle. What we have left here is sort of the drag ends of glucose. So all that's left of it is acetyl-CoA, 2 carbons stuck together. And this is what we feed into the citric acid cycle. The citric acid cycle is a bunch of pretty complicated chemical reactions, but really all you need to remember about it is that it's how you take this acetyl-CoA, which is really like the last remnants of what's left of glucose, and we're going to completely take it apart. We're going to separate the last 2 carbons, and we're going to harvest all the remaining electrons. Now we have individual carbons. You can breathe these out, off they go, it's carbon dioxide, they're gone. And instead, all we have now is high energy electrons. So we need a new taxi. So here we go. Empty taxi, full taxi. Now it's NADH. We're going to put those over here because we're going to need them in a minute. Remember, we have to do it twice because we have 2 of these. So this is going to enter the citric acid cycle. It's a bunch of complicated chemistry goes on. Ultimately, this gets broken apart. All the electrons get pulled out of it. And the carbons are now broken into the molecules broken into individual carbons, which are CO2. At this point, we're going to breathe that out, and the electrons are harvested. So at the end of this, I should fill my diagram in here. We're going to do the citric acid cycle, and this is happening in the matrix of the mitochondria. Matrix of mitochondria, and you break apart the acetyl-CoA into carbon dioxide, and those are each 1 carbon molecules, and they are breathed out after they go into the environment. So at the end of this, you've completely destroyed glucose. It started off with 6 carbons all hooked together, and then you broke it in half, and then you stripped off a carbon, and then you broke apart the last 2 carbons. The glucose is gone, but what we do have is all the high energy electrons, that were harvested from glucose in these taxes. This is what we're going to need for the last step. And if we go all the way back to our original equation for cellular respiration, you start off with glucose. It was glucose plus oxygen. Now, we haven't used any oxygen yet, so we don't know what that's all about, but it creates carbon dioxide. Well, we've seen where that comes from. And it also creates water. We haven't made any water yet. So we have parts of that equation we haven't dealt with yet. The oxygen part, no sign of oxygen here. And the water product, we haven't made any water yet. We have to find out where that comes from. And that's in the last step, which we're going to go back to the slides for. One kind of interesting thing I want to briefly talk about here, I think we maybe covered this already in class, is that the glucose is eventually turned into carbon dioxide, and so you breathe it out. And if you think about people that lose a great deal of weight, like on a show like The Biggest Loser or something like that, how does that weight leave their body? Like, where does it go? I don't know that anybody really thinks about that. Like, how does it exit them? There's probably ideas that you pee it out, you poop it out, it goes out somehow. Really, the weight that they burn off, they actually breathe out as carbon dioxide. They lose all their weight through their nose. They're breathing out excess carbon dioxide. These carbons were in the sugar that they ate, or the fat that was stored in their body was converted to sugar and then run through this process, and then they breathed it out. So they contributed to global warming a little bit as they were losing weight, adding CO2 into the atmosphere, but that's how it exited their body. All right, we'll have a last video with slides to finish this up.